Hey, my name is Shay and welcome to my channel. Today I want to tell you the story about a girl who seemingly had her life together, successful in school, relationships, maybe family, but was secretly compensating and coping so hard that she almost convinced herself that life was just too difficult for her and that she probably just wasn't cut out for it. And of course, the girl that I'm talking about is me. And I am a former gifted student that was recently diagnosed with ADHD. So let's sit back, grab a drink and a snack, and let's talk about neurodivergence. I just want to give a couple disclaimers first. I am not a therapist. I do not be claiming to give any mental health advice. I'm just merely speaking on my own journey and letting you know my personal experience. I am, however, a third-year PhD student in psychology, so I do bring to the table some background knowledge of the topic. However, it seems pretty interesting that I wasn't able to apply this psychological knowledge to myself until the age of 27, even though I've been in the psychology field for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years at this point. So it just goes to show you that you should seek professional help if you're struggling, because it wasn't until I had a year of therapy under my belt that I was really able to understand and peel back the layers and really reveal the beast underneath, which is ADHD. So I'm just gonna go basically in chronological order and give you a little bit of background as to my childhood and maybe why all these symptoms sort of went unnoticed for so long. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was qualified as a gifted student when I was 9 years old and basically put into like a special stream. Other gifted students probably identify with or have gone through something similar, but basically I was taken out of regular class and put in a special class. So I was basically taken out of the regular stream and put in a class with a bunch of like-minded students. One thing that maybe many gifted children can attest to is that we're all kind of weird. Let's just put it out there. A gifted diagnosis or gifted qualities can kind of come along with a lot of quirks. It is actually considered a type of neurodivergency, just like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD itself. So it's not surprising that many of us, that I was basically allowed to be kind of wacky and a little bit, bossy, a little bit more impulsive, because my class was so small and it was really tailored to the students. We weren't encouraged to basically conform to the rigors of other classes. We were really allowed to experiment. We were allowed to really express ourselves and to the fullest in our weird ways. In high school, I also went to a self-paced learning high school, which basically means that instead of sitting down in a class and going from class to class and having all your tests be designated at a specific time, you basically taught the content to yourself and then took the test when you were ready. A lot of kids with different sports, like athletic activities and stuff, would go to this school because it allowed them to go on the road and basically do school on the road. And this was perfect for me because I think it was always sold to me, or I convinced myself it was because I was too smart or something to sit in a regular classroom because the pace wasn't fast enough for me. Part of that is probably true. But there's another significant component to this, which is that I don't think that I could have sat in a classroom and really followed along patiently. It kind of drove me crazy to sort of sit there and just listen and not use all of my senses to learn. I discovered a coping mechanism for this later that maybe I'll share. But for people like me, it was just better. I just felt, you know what, I can teach it to myself. I don't want to sit in a classroom. And it worked out really well for me. I went to the gifted program in junior high and then the self-paced learning high school. And I began to compensate really well for my symptoms quite early on. And part of this is because my sibling was diagnosed with ADHD, and later on my second sibling was diagnosed with ADHD. And a lot of the attention and focus in my family went to them. And now they're younger than me by a significant degree, 7 and 10 years. And I think it was really that their symptoms were much more externalized. So they really expressed it by acting out, I think, a lot more than me. And I'm not sure if I had been an only child or something, or a younger child, I'm not sure if I would have done the same. But basically, as a function of me being the eldest child and a lot of expectations put on me to be perfect and to help around the house and really to be my mom's little mini me, I ended up compensating a lot. One of these coping mechanisms and compensation vices that I still do to this day began when I was very early. So I started drinking when I was barely 13, and that was also the first time when I tried smoking marijuana. And I have ended up carrying on that habit through into my late 20s. So especially weed, I found that it was just the drug that clicked for me. I'm not sure, still to this day I have a lot of investigation to do as to why weed is the drug for me, but it almost like slowed my brain down and allowed me to stay in the present moment. And so I could actually focus better, weirdly enough, if I was smoking. Also, with ADHD comes a lot of emotional dysregulation and things like that, and it really did make me more easygoing and go with the flow, as opposed to my natural state, which is quite anxious and with a need to be in control of a lot of situations. So that also meant I ended up using substances from an early age, and these addictions or these substance dependencies are still with me to this day. Being consistently told that you need to be a high achiever because of your gifted status, and because my parents were preoccupied with the siblings that needed more, well, from their perception, needed more attention and care, I believe that they just didn't want to believe that I had any issues or that I was struggling at all. Hello from the editing room. I couldn't seem to finish my train of thought here. What I was trying to say is that my parents were preoccupied with siblings who had greater needs, at least according to their perspective. So even though things were hard for me, they flew under the radar. Sorry about that. So this created a weird almost paradox in my brain, where I knew that carrying out the functions of everyday life was extremely difficult for me. Cleaning my room, getting myself to places on time, being able to actually work for 5 days a week or work in a job that I didn't get bored of in like 2 weeks. All these things were extremely difficult for me, but I don't know really, I'm still questioning as to why nobody saw this or understood that I was struggling. I guess I just hid it really well, or there was other stuff going on that needed more attention. In school, I was always passing with good grades, but it led to this extreme imposter syndrome because I basically gave up anything that I wasn't immediately good at, that didn't come to me immediately. And it found it really, really hard to work on things that were challenging for me. Being a gifted student, not a lot of things at that level were that challenging. It wasn't until I started moving up, I ended up going to grad school, and now I finished my master's and I'm in my PhD, where you really have to sit and concentrate and learn really difficult concepts and topics and skills that aren't going to come very easy to anybody. That discipline, I just thought basically that I was lazy and that I lacked discipline, but it's not that. It's that my brain, I have a fast processing speed, but maintaining that processing speed for a long period of time is extremely, extremely difficult, and my battery runs out very, very quickly. So a lot of these issues started to flare up in first year university, which I think is pretty common for a lot of people that are diagnosed with ADHD, they end up trying to go to school and they end up really lost. I ended up being diagnosed with social anxiety. Not quite sure why that was a thing, but yeah, I was recommended to go to like a social anxiety group therapy thing, which did teach was basically my first exposure to mindfulness, which will be a consistent theme and something that will help me throughout the years. But I ended up dropping that therapy because I didn't feel like my concerns were really being listened to. And this is another thing with therapy, is that sometimes it takes many different tries to find someone that really listens, or to find the right therapist. And it's expensive. And the free therapy provided by my school, my institution, was not very calibrated to my needs at the school that I was at the time. I ended up moving home after 2 years and transferring schools to be back with my family. I was basically not doing well. I was very depressed and just low functioning, smoking weed every day in second year university, and that really began a long and drawn out downward spiral. And I basically gave up on therapy, or I didn't end up going back until probably about 5 to 6 years later. I was really doing the stuff that's been happening over the last couple years, where you're forced to stick in your house and you're forced to just sit and face all of your issues head on, that I decided to get back into therapy. The resources available at my new institution were far better than previous, and so we started talking about a lot of the childhood trauma and different things like that I had suspected that I was dealing with for a long time. Really delved into those and started peeling back the layers. As we were peeling back the layers, I started noticing that even though I was dealing and processing a lot of the trauma from when I was younger, but something was still missing, and something I felt was still off. Or I had suspected that I had some sort of neurodivergency, given the fact that my siblings are both diagnosed with ADHD, and I highly suspect that my mom is an undiagnosed ADHD as well. But I think I had built up a stigma in my head towards people with ADHD, because I was really at the direct impact of a lot of the symptoms that one can deal with, including, almost grew up in an environment of neglect. And I'm not saying this to stigmatize people with ADHD, but I just felt that I had a sense of superiority, a wrong sense of superiority, because I didn't really understand the disorder. I still don't fully understand it, and I'm on the journey to doing that now. But strangely enough, I had less of a stigma towards autism spectrum disorder, and I thought that seemed to align fairly closely with what I was experiencing. I noticed that my social battery would run out extremely quickly. I could never maintain eye contact when I was talking with people, because I later realized that it's because my mind goes in a billion different directions, and it's hard for me to stay focused on one train of thought. But really, I just thought that I was like socially awkward, even though the people around me didn't say that I had any social difficulties. So that was sort of a clue that autism might not fit. But these ideas of meltdowns, or basically when you have to go, when you're so overstimulated that you really have to shut off the world and completely decompress for a long period of time and focus on your special interests until you're rejuvenated, is a trait of autism, but it's also a trait of ADHD. So eventually I asked my therapist to refer me to a diagnostician. And about a month ago, I had my appointment, I had my assessment, I filled out a bunch of questionnaires, and she met with me for several hours. And a couple weeks later, we had the follow-up appointment, and she said, you have maybe some traits of autism, but I don't really think it fits. I think if you want to take on this label, I think that ADHD is probably what's going on. So here we are. I received that diagnosis about a week ago, and I'm still waiting. I have a referral to a physician. I have a referral to an occupational therapist, which I'm extremely excited about because I cannot do my day-to-day like everyone else does. I just cannot work for, 8 hours at a time and just sit there and work at a desk. It's like my brain will not let me do that. For a long time, I just thought, you're just lazy and undisciplined. You're just not passionate. You just don't have what it takes. And no, I do have what it takes, whatever that means. But it just might look a little bit differently for me and others with ADHD than it will for your neurotypical person. And the world, and especially coming from academia, it's not really set up. The world is not set up for people with neurodivergencies. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the occupational therapist has to say. So I've developed some coping mechanisms that I can talk about. Let's talk about the healthy ones because I don't want to encourage reliance on substances or like weed, for example, to get you through. One thing that really works for me to actually pay attention in meetings, maybe when you can get away with it, let's say you're on Zoom and you're on a conference call and nobody can see what you're doing and you kind of just have to look like you're paying attention, but if you just simply look and stare at the camera, like you will not be able to pay attention because your brain won't let you. I will pull out my phone and play phone games. Very simple ones, like I really enjoy 2048. Which is just basically you just move and swipe and move numbers into one another and they like increase as you combine them. It doesn't require very much brain power, but it keeps that part of your brain stimulated that would otherwise be going insane if you had to just focus on one person speaking. So sometimes with people, I will tell them, hey, listen, in order to concentrate on what you're saying, I need to be doing something with my hands or doing something on my phone. And if people don't want to deal with that, then that's kind of on them because at least you're communicating your needs, and I think it will go a long way to helping your relationships if people can understand and accept it. It's not that big of a deal, but it felt like it was a big deal because it felt like I was deliberately blowing people off, or just that I was like taking the easy way out or cheating or something like that for playing on my phone while I was supposed to be listening. But anytime I do that in class and the teacher would call on me to answer a question, I'd be able to say, yeah, I know the answer. You're not going to catch me out on not paying attention because this is what I need to do in order to be paying attention. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I've already been talking for about 20 minutes. So this channel will focus on maybe ADHD skills or continue to talk about my ADHD journey, maybe what my personal experience is like. But one of the aspects of my ADHD is that I like to go down research rabbit holes. So I am intending on making this channel more of like a deep dive channel into all the weird and wacky places that my brain takes me. And I hope that you'll come along with me on this journey. Me again. I cannot believe that last part didn't record. I have absolutely no idea what happened, but basically I wanted to say thank you very much for listening to my story. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.